All right, here is reflex arc. And when we talk about reflex, reflex simply means rapid pre-program. Rapid means it's fast. Pre-program means it was previously programmed. Uh, and it is involuntary response of your muscles and glands to a stimulus. Now, ideally, you expect that the actions of your muscles should be voluntary actions, not always. Now, when it is not the voluntary actions, we call it reflex. Now, even though the nervous coordination of my 11-month-old is not fully formed, and she may not see fire and run, but if she touch something hot, let's say she touch a stove, she's going to take her hand out straight. If she touch a needle, she's going to take her hand out straight. Those are reflex action. They are very rapid actions. They are pre-programmed, and they are involuntary response of muscles or glands to a stimulus. Now, the major thing that reflex does is to help to maintain homeostasis. Now, there's something that we call reflex arc. Reflex arc simply means the pattern or flow of reflex action, how reflex action happen. And so I'll be looking at the components of the arc. What makes the arc? What are the things that happen that we call reflex action? Now, reflex action have 5 components majorly. There's number 1, the receptor. Number 2 is the sensory neuron. Number 3 is the integrating center. Number 4 is the motor neuron, and number 5 is the effector. So I'll pick one of each of them, one after the other, and discuss what this reflex arc is. Now, the first one is, think about it as though you have stepped on a needle. You have just put your hand on a very sharp needle. What is going to happen at that time? That is the stimulus. The stimulus is going to be received, and then it's going to change that mechanical stimulus, and it will change into, so the receptor, right, receive the stimulus in quotes as a mechanical message, and it will change to an electrical impulse. It changes to an electrical signal that the brain can understand. So this mechanical process is going to be converted into electrical signal, and the electrical signal is going to be transported through the sensory neuron. So the sensory neuron is going to pick it. So you got the receptor. Then the next thing is the sensory neuron picks the message. Now, don't forget something. What kind of neurons are the sensory neurons? Now, you remember that I told you that the posterior segment of the posterior root carries sensory information. So that means the sensory neurons are the bipolar neurons. So look at these neurons here. You will see that they are exactly like the bipolar neuron. Here is where you have the dendrite, you see, and here you have the cell body, and here you have the soma, the dendrite. So the axon. So you see, the dendrites pick the message here. After the receptor has received the message, transduce it into electrical stimulus from this mechanical state. Then the sensory neuron, which is a bipolar neuron, picks up the picks up the signal, the electrical signal, and send it straight. You see, it's going to send it straight into the central nervous system. So the neurons now has gotten here, or the electrical signal has gotten right here now. Now, what do you see here? You see another neuron here. This neuron that is here is what we call the interneuron, which does the integrative center duty. So here is another neuron, integrating center of the spinal cord or of the central nervous system. Then the message will be processed here. Once the message is processed here, what's going to happen next? The next thing is the spinal cord interpret the message, or the central nervous system interpret the message, says, okay, this is the nice thing. If we see this kind of message, there is a danger. That means you should take your hand off this nail and not let your hand sit there. Now, immediately, the motor neuron acts quite fast. You see, the motor neuron is the next segment. Then it's going to take that message immediately that the interneuron has processed in the central nervous system. The interneuron, the motor neuron now takes it. Motor, you remember, motor neurons, anterior roots or ventral roots carries motor neurons. It carries motor information. All right. So it's going to, and those are afferent neurons, right? So this is going to carry the information straight and say, okay, now we got a message for the muscle. Immediately it brought the message. And so the message comes here, and then the message comes to the effector, which is the muscles, and the muscle is going to contract. So this is the message now landing on motor end plate of the muscles. If you still remember it in contraction, when we look at contraction, so the motor end plate received the message. Acetylcholine here, you remember acetylcholine is going to be released here, which is a neurotransmitter, transmit the message. And so between the synaptic end bulb here and the motor end plate is what we call the synaptic cleft, which is going to release the acetylcholine into the synaptic cleft. The muscle receive the message. Acetylcholine receptors on the muscle receive the message. The muscle membrane becomes disturbed. The sarcolemma secretes or release calcium. Calcium then goes to bind to troponin, and then contraction happen. Now, immediately, what's going to happen? Your hand will get off the needle straight, because a quick action, a quick message has come from the central nervous system saying, this is danger, take your hand off. That is what we call the reflex arc. Now, so the reflex arc it involves the receptor, receive the message, the sensory neurons, which is also the afferent neuron, brings sensory information. Then the integrating center is the interneuron that processes the message, interpret it, and tell the body what to do. Then you have the motor neuron, which take the impulse now to from the central nervous system and takes it to the effector. Effector can be a gland, effector can be a muscle. Now, the only problem comes when let's say somebody have stroke now, any form of cerebrospinal, any form of cerebral disorder. If somebody have that now, the person will not be able to detect this information and not be able to hack. So the person step on a needle, and it's going to step on a needle because the spinal cord, where the central nervous system, where this reflex should be processed, the neurons are damaged. If there's no neuron to carry the message, then the message will not be conveyed to the nervous system, or the message will not be transmitted to the muscles, right? Thank you.